evening. I'm joined again by Dr. Sebastian Ostrich because we're introducing his course on Spengler with a series of conversations on Oswald Spengler, and tonight we'll focus on the Faustian Soul and maybe a little bit also on the Apollonian Soul. And I think it's important to point out that Spengler really focuses this on Goethe's Faust, and especially on Faust Part 2 rather than Faust Part 1 only, and not so much on Marlowe's Faust. If you have any questions for Sebastian on Spengler or on the course, just let us know in the chat and we'll respond. And if you wish to enroll, you can do so now. The link to enroll is this one here in the chat, but also in the description of this video. I will now begin with a few thoughts on Goethe's Faust. If you remember, one of the clauses, if not the climactic clause of the agreement or the contract between Dr. Faustus and Mephistopheles in Goethe reads or says that Faust must not say, Augenblick verweile doch, du bist so schön, which we can translate as moment, stay a while, you are so lovely. So whenever Faust comes to a position where he actually does want to linger, to stay with the moment, to rest, as it were, that's when his soul...
We're satisfied, actually.
Yes, that's when his soul can be taken or is up for grabs for Mephistopheles. But this also means, of course, that there's no leisureliness about Faustus. He is utterly restless. The Faustian soul is thus described as restless, and as restless by contract. But there is a moment towards the end of the second part of Goethe's play where actually Faust proclaims, then to the moment I'd dare say, stay a while, you are so lovely. And this happens, though, precisely in the moment when Dr. Faustus looks out on his utter development or destruction, depending on your viewpoint, of the earth. Goethe, who was very fond of the idea of the Suez Canal, may have self-critiqued him, may have critiqued himself here. And this comes after Faust had sent someone to kill Philemon and Baucis, who you may know from Ovid's Metamorphoses, the old couple who allows Zeus in for a night to stay, and when they die, they wish to be transformed and morphed into trees so they wouldn't have to see each other die. Now, Dr. Faust kills them and gets rid of them, and thereby cuts modernity off symbolically or metaphorically from the past entirely. And in this very moment, Faust has found, not really a moment that he, not really rest, but he wants to stay with that moment when he's finally able to develop the entire planet and order and organize everything according to his demands. Sorry. So we are.
There must be a newer version of Faust that you've been reading.
I'm writing all day, his or her. So okay, let's now see. And by the way, there's a line that the Mystic Choir sings, which Spengler takes very seriously, which is this one: all of the transient is parable only. Alles Vergängliche ist nur ein Gleichnis. This is in the very last verse of Goethe's Faust. So, Sebastian, to you.
Well, yes, that's really an amazing an amazing end to a really amazing and quite strange and overboarding or a book overboarding with ideas. Faust too, it's so overly rich and strange, and it is full, it is packed with themes that Spengler will pick up and develop. Not only what the thing you just quoted, where you actually have, well, if you like, his entire idea of a morphology of history already put into a maxim, if you like, but also like special topics like the one you just explained. This tendency of civilization to I don't know, get rid of or to get rid of what has been a traditional way of life in order to control and expand and all these things. You have certain even topics about like money and modern capitalism in Faust 2, where Mephistopheles invents paper money and things like that. A lot of things that we'll be talking about in the course. But today we want to talk about, well, the Faustian soul and the Faustian man. And well, I mentioned this to you earlier that I've seen some videos online that were talking about, what what does Spengler mean by the Faustian soul, and they often refer to Marlowe because obviously in the English-speaking world, this is the Faust that is probably even better known than Goethe's Faust. But for Spengler, it's clear that his Faust is Goethe's Faust. This is the Faust he refers to. So all these things you just quoted are very important, and we should look to Goethe's Faust, not to Marlowe's Faust. I think if you want to have a deeper understanding of what Spengler means. So so I think one interesting point about the Faustian soul that we should point out is that usually when people talk about the Faustian soul, they might think of the Abendland, the West, and then think, well, the West, obviously the West started with the ancient Greeks. So Aristotle and Plato, they're all representatives of the Faustian soul. But that is not the case. So this is really important, I think, to get clear right away that the Faustian soul means a type of, well, spirituality or mentality, if you like, a cultural spirituality, a cultural soul that starts for Spengler at around 900 after Christ. So it is not the ancient soul. This is the Apollonian soul that you already mentioned, and this is totally structured totally differently. Actually, you understand what the Faustian soul is by contrasting it to the Apollonian soul. So maybe we can do that to narrow in or focus in on the Faustian soul. So Apollonian, that term obviously that rings a bell, and you think of Nietzsche's distinction between Apollonian and Dionysian soul, and this is something that Spengler obviously wants to refer to, and even mentions Nietzsche in this context. And for him as well, the Apollonian soul is one of that is focused on form and order, but also on finitude.
Yes, limitation. The enclosed cosmos.
Exactly. Limitation, enclosed cosmos. And you see this then pretty much in every aspect of the ancient world, of ancient culture. You see this in sculpture. You see this even in their mathematics, which focuses on, which is Euclidean mathematics or geometry. And so it's the idea of finite bodies, and there politically you have the idea of a polis, which is a quite finite and limited, compact political body, and so on. So you have, and this is Spengler's idea, that you have like a basic, spiritual notion that permeates all spheres of a culture. And for the Apollonian soul,
Yeah.
it is finitude, um, concreteness, bodily concreteness, corporality, and so on.
Yeah.
Um, and the Faustian soul, then, in contrast to it, is in, well, many ways it's exact opposite. So it's infinity. It's this, you already mentioned Faust's restlessness, and this restlessness comes from not being satisfied with anything finite that is put in front
Yeah.
of you, but
Yeah.
negating everything finite that is in front of you, not in order to gain something else which is finite, but in the last consequence of it, to deny, to negate finitude as such. So for Spengler, this becomes symbolically expressed in the understanding of space,
Yeah.
which now of pure space, or maybe you can even say spatiality as such. So it's not about concrete bodies, spatial bodies, but it's about, well, space as such. And it's not about relation between finite objects, but relationality as such. And you see that in mathematics, according to Spengler, where it's now about function and analysis and all these things that become dominant, and they are all expressions of this Faustian restlessness, of this desire and drivenness to go beyond. Yeah, so that is probably a first step towards understanding what Spengler means by the Faustian soul. And then you can look at the different fields of culture. You can look at music. You can look at mathematics, at science, and so on. And you see fundamental differences between the Apollonian soul and the ancient culture.
Yeah. I've forgotten the precise section where he says it, rather the beginning of the book, or that it is in trying to steal away from the omniscient God introduced to Europe from, let's say, the Middle East, trying to steal away a Mephistophelian pact from the very beginning, trying to steal the mysteries from God's creation, is what drives scientific development from the very beginning of the Faustian age. So for Spengler, the Abendland, the Occident, the West, let's say, begins not as, for example, for Heidegger with Anaximander and Plato,
Yes, very
but
different.
firmly 1,000 years ago, and is driven ultimately by an attempt to burst open and tear down any limitation, and which leads ultimately to the well the opening, or the bursting open of the cosmos, of the enclosed cosmos that we still see in an Aristotelian universe, where the outer ring is the unmoved mover. The thought of an outside doesn't even occur to Aristotle. It would be an absurd question. Whereas with thinkers like Giordano Bruno and others, that is very much opened up to the infinite and the infinitely expanding universe. And the stark difference, as Sebastian pointed out, to the Apollonian, so to the Greek soul, to the Greek understanding of the cosmos and of themselves, is precisely that the Apollonian is ultimately based in finitude, but also concrete body. So a number, when we count something, we actually count what is right in front of us. We do not count in the abstract, for example. Whereas in the Faustian time, I wouldn't even say it's number. I would rather say it's value. The value is arbitrary. It can be applied anywhere. So yeah, go on.
No, that's exactly it. So Yeah, so the lecture I was preparing just a couple of, or I finished preparing a couple of days ago about
Yeah,
mathematics
yeah,
in Spengler is one of the most fascinating, I think, aspects of his theory, because um, then you see that the ancient way of doing mathematics is not a, if you will, they didn't know less about mathematics than we did from a Spenglerian view, but they had a different mathematics because their whole
yeah,
outlook on being was different. So for them, our way of doing mathematics would have been utterly pointless and absurd, and would have been seen as a limitation itself. So, and this way of like seeing the world differently all of a sudden with Spengler is yeah, it's one of the best parts of
yeah,
engaging with him. Now, one thing I want to add to what you were just saying, um, in mentioning well, God and Christianity, at least indirectly you did, if I understand you correctly.
yeah,
This is very interesting. This is very interesting as well, because there we typically we have this tendency to say, well, the West, that's a Christian, the Christian culture, the Christian West. And obviously for Spengler as well, Christianity plays a very important role in the West, but he would not understand the West as decidedly Christian. It's very interesting, and obviously as a Catholic I cannot agree with it, but it's very interesting that you have, on the Spenglerian view, you have the Urchristenheit, so Christianity at its roots, at its historical
yeah,
roots, belongs not to the Apollonian soul and not to the Western soul, but to the Magian soul,
yeah. To the mage. Yeah,
magische Seele. So that
yeah,
which becomes then the Arabian culture, and so, and which in that then ends in the Islamic world. And then you have, so that's very different view of looking at history right away, you can tell, because the Christianity that you have in Europe or in the West, and for Spengler, is, if you will, is a, he would probably say it's a pseudomorphosis
yeah.
of the original
Or
Christianity,
it's peak
which,
paganism.
yeah. So, and pseudomorphosis means it looks like, so from a
It looks
Spenglerian
like
view, it's like, oh,
Christianity,
you look at Christianity, and oh, it's a
but
development of Christianity, but actually it's not. It's just, it looks like Christianity, but it's not. Or
yeah,
it has taken over some aspects, but it has transformed it in its own Faustian
yeah.
way. So it's like a Faustian capture of a non-Faustian idea, if you will. Um, and so this is very
Well,
interesting,
your
and also this
Catholic
is
soul is bleeding, but that's okay.
my Catholic soul is not bleeding, because I'm very happy to critique this. No, but this is also a very interesting, I think, aspect of our course, and one that I'm interested
Yeah,
in is
yeah,
looking at, if you will, like Spengler's theological or non-theological investment in history, or way of looking at history. For example, if you look at thinkers like Erik Voegelin, it's very obvious that for them, understanding history is also understanding history as divine revelation. And this, for Spengler, it does not really play a role, because Spengler is an immanent thinker, if you will. He's not invested in like real, in the idea of real revelation. He talks a lot about religion, but this gives his idea of his history obviously a very different turn or framing than you would have on a Christian understanding of history, where everything pivots, on this one point of the
yeah.
incarnation of God. And so it's Spengler is very helpful to understand history, even in different ways, in non-Spenglerian ways, because he forces you to see and think about all these very important topics and differences that we've just been mentioning.
Just briefly, if you have questions, let us know in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. We'll be around maybe another 10, 15 minutes or so. I'd also just like to point out briefly that this is part of a series of conversations because Sebastian is teaching a course on Oswald Spengler's The Decline of the West. We will be reading the most important sections of the book in over 11 weeks. 10 seminars in total. Seminars begin 7th of October this year. So if you want, you can enroll now. The link to do so is in the description of this video. And as I said, if you have any questions, we'll get to them at the end. There's an option to enroll just in the course content if you don't have time for the seminars, or if you have time for the seminars, and you should definitely come. Or you could also just take additional private sessions with Sebastian as well, if you so desire. And now, let me just also say that I think there's a tendency online to glorify the Faustian and to think of it as, and this is again gets mixed in with Spengler. Spengler is, to put it simply, a cultural relativist. That's to say, he does not think that Western culture or civilization at this point is in any way supreme to any other culture or civilization across time and across space. So either that be now or earlier. It's a specific one. It's peculiar. And it has its own destiny and its fate. And we are now entering its, according to Spengler, its end phase, which he refers to as civilization. That's the moment when a high culture becomes ossified, petrified, and loses its life-giving impulses and can basically only just manage its decline at best. But what's important, especially when we come back to Goethe now, is that Goethe's Faust is a tragic figure. So Faustian development, the organizer, Faust the organizer, the developer. So not the Faust of the first part, the Faust who wants to, get laid and make out with a 15-year-old or whatever she is.
Which is pretty much it. Yes.
Not the pederast, not that guy, but the Faust of the second part. And what's so crucial about the second part is that here Faust desperately tries to reconnect with antiquity, with the past, and it turns out to be impossible. It turns out to be Helena comes back, for example. But Mephistopheles also is confused by the demons of antiquity. So there's utter confusion. There's no connection. Goethe, by the way, Goethe himself tried throughout his life to find connection to the past, and had to find out to the antiquity, had to find out that he was taken for his own, that he was fooled by his own idealizations of the Greeks. And in his search, for example, for the primordial man that he thought he might have found in Sicily or in Napoli for some reason. So, in any event, there's a fundamentally tragic element to the Faustian development. The development is executed by the death of millions. That has to be clear. So there's no denying that. Organizing the world according to the machine and building the Suez Canal that Goethe couldn't even wait to see, and unfortunately he didn't see it. But this is done on the back of millions who will necessarily die, and that's a tragic element. But also the Faustian man himself is tragic, because he cannot rest with any moment, not even when that full development is there, on the highest price that he pays, which is being cut off entirely from the past, which is the ultimate. That's the initial. That's the Urschmerz. That's the primal pain of modernity. Is that sensation that we are being cut off from something significant of the past, even though we have textual access to the past. But without, sorry, go on. Yeah.
No,
But
no, no,
anyways, there could be one more thing because you mentioned pseudomorphosis. There can also be a pseudo-Faustian future, where precisely the tragic element disappears, the Faustian spreads across the globe, and it just becomes purely about development, but without any of the tragic element that enriches the Faustian experience.
Oh, which is then just a horror story.
Yeah.
Yes, which is that would be just like, oh my god, I don't know if anything has been written that is so terrifying as this vision. But yes, you're absolutely right. We have to be careful not to get too sentimental with the idea of the Faustian. And yes, of course, for Spengler, we are inhabiting the Faustian world, and we cannot be anything else. And we have to be realistic about who we are, and also if you will, the tragedy of the Faustian soul or the Faustian man is in a sense, of course, his own tragedy, but in another way, it is the tragedy of every culture, because becoming a civilization that is, if you will, like a technocratic, rigid version of culture where spirit is dying pretty much, and you lose what is a living tradition. That is according to Spengler, the destiny of all cultures. This is just what it means to be a living entity, a higher living entity that we call culture. So it's not about we have to be careful not to be too romantic about the idea, or to think we're too special.
Because it is, because what I see is, of course, that Elon Musk, for example, is considered a Faustian man because he wants to go to Mars, which is probably as likely as his self-driving cars, which are never coming. So that's a personal tragedy. But it is ultimately a tragic vision if humanity has to leave behind the Earth. But if we don't recognize that as tragic, then it becomes a farce. What's the English? I don't know. Is that English?
It just becomes ridiculous.
It's melodramatic. It's basically a soap opera, where bigger, better. Go to Mars, man. Look at the big rocket. No. That's not what it is. We have to see that we are here driven, if we take Spengler by his word, we are possessed by that soul that drives us towards the quantification and organization of the planet in such a way that maybe, tragically, we will want to leave to reach infinity and reach infinite space, which is impossible to reach. See the tragedy? So that's and without that, it's basically, it just boils down to a fetishization, a melodramatic fetishization, I don't know what the stupid word is in English, but maybe it's the same word. So, but
it should be the same word.
Yeah.
But this is probably a good point in time to answer one of the questions that that Lucas Hagemans sent in. And he asks, that's it. Can we consider the Olympic motto "Citius Altius Fortius Communita" as Faustian? So faster, higher, stronger, together. And this is I think the motto of the modern Olympics, exactly. And he writes that in a different. Well, it's a interesting question because, well, it's telling that it is the motto of the modern Olympics, and so if the idea is to find out which among a certain group of men is the fastest relative to a given group of men, I think this could be still considered an ancient idea. Yeah. Like if you have like, it's the same as if you have like certain shapes and then you want to find out which is you have 3 triangles and you find out which one is the biggest.
Yeah.
But there's another interpretation of this quote, which means, well, it's not about actually finding out who's the fastest, but it's about breaking the record,
Yes.
not knowing that it will be broken and can be broken again. That
if need be by a nanosecond.
Exactly.
So it's not so. In the original Olympic Games, you had one man won. There was no silver and no bronze medal. There was one winner, one who was victorious. That's it. The time, it was not about the time that was measured, but now we're actually racing against our quantification of time, which is infinitely divisible.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we will be we're breaking the records in terms of nanoseconds or split nanoseconds in order just to break the record. And as soon as technology improves so much so that you measure whatever the speed even better, then we can break records basically anytime someone's running, because there will always be a nanosecond you could squeeze out of it again. And hence we're actually not really at all in the original Olympic spirit, but in a very Faustian spirit.
Yeah, very nice.
I like that. Infinity, which infinity is not just infinity there, it's also infinity into the negative. Hence, for example, look at growth. Look at the stock market. You can have a graph of the stock market which continues to go up, as does public debt, and that's not a coincidence. That is absolutely, it's not a coincidence. It's basically causally related. You have to increase debt in a fiat. Fiat money is the best example of a Faustian soul that becomes can no longer express itself in painting and in music, but now only in paper money. So let's just.
This is exactly the scene where in Faust 2, Mephistopheles explains to the emperor how he can make money, or like virtual money, due to all the riches that are yet to be exploited, which are his. So, which of course then that makes necessary a certain measure of which is valuable, but still to come into existence as something valuable, which is then paper money. So this is exactly what you're just describing. This coincidence of rising debt and rising stock markets, which is in Faust 2. As well. I was just looking at that today, so that's why it came to my mind.
So when the Athenians or the Romans, when they had to debase their currency, which every culture, once it turns into a civilization, it becomes ossified, it has less life force. For some reason, it also has to debase its currency, but they had to do that physically. So they were adding bronze to the silver. And other, they decreased the metal content of gold, for example, in their gold coins and silver coins, etc. Well, we do that very differently, don't we? We don't even need coins. We need digits that are so we can actually debase our currency ad infinitum, and how that will end, no one knows. But so we're completely divided from that original being based or grounded in physical limitation. That's what the Faustian is. So what we're trying to understand also in our course, by the way, enrollment is open, is the Faustian soul, because that gives us an understanding better of who we are and what drives the world today, what drives economics, what drives politics, what drives the sciences.
Like one question that comes to my mind right away is in which way Bitcoin is Faustian, because there it's very interesting. You have because the idea is that you have something, you just have something finite, but at the same time, since it's really not material at all anymore, so
look, Bitcoin is the ultimate fiat money, because at least with the government-backed money, there's still some rules that apply. With Bitcoin, it's just boom, there it is on the so-called blockchain, quote unquote. And what Bitcoin does quite ingeniously is, yes, it's finite in terms of its amount, but you can infinitely split it. So you could buy a fracture of a fracture of a fracture of a Bitcoin. You're not actually buying a coin at all. But you see how funny that is in terms of the language, how they try to trick you. You're not buying a coin. There's no coin. And it was also quite strange that the big coin, which doesn't exist, is always portrayed as golden, as a golden coin. There are no gold coins. There's no Bitcoin. There's just calculations along a blockchain that could disappear the next minute someone turns off the blockchain. So it's completely immaterial, and it's this striving for immateriality that at the same time, so to reach the level of a tragic insight is not to, again, oh great, so awesome. No, see it's almost, it's a bit of a farce though. There's no tragedy here. I mean, it's personally tragic, but
doesn't it try to like recapture, through its like this the finitude or the idea of the finitude of Bitcoin is one of its selling points. So you can say that in a certain tragic or comic manner, a tragic comic manner, it tries to recapture what is gone, namely the gold standard, and it tries to recapture it in this new, very extremely Faustian way, at least. When you look at it the way you described it. So I think this is a really very very interesting thing to think about.
Bitcoin is about control. It's purely Faustian, maybe with some inkling or longing for what isn't possible, what isn't open to us, which is to say, Augenblick, verweile doch, du bist so schön. Moment, dare I say, you shall stay, you are so lovely. Because once you have that, I mean, look at the price movement of Bitcoin. It's completely insane. It's a speculative bubble. Even just, by the way, the very possibility of speculative bubbles, which are as old as Faustian trade. So derivatives trading, for example, which are bets on so I can start it, as far as we know, in Venice 500-600 years ago. So you could bet, you could actually bet not on the ship coming back, but on the insurance policy. So it started hundreds and hundreds of years ago. How can you do this? Well, because money is no longer tied down already back then to anything physical, but is ultimately just it could be a letter. The Wechsel was the German. I forgot the English. I have to look that up. Sorry. The Wechselbrief. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I don't know the English term for it, but
the bill of exchange, promissory note. So apologies.
Promissory note. Yeah, promissory note. Yeah. So I think I think we can say already that that the idea of the Faustian man or the Faustian soul is very rich and helpful to look or try to analyze very current phenomena as well. And so I hope we answered your question, Lucas Hagemanns, in some sense. And from your question, we got off to the whole Bitcoin theme. There was another question. Whether I was familiar with Spengler's critique, with the Spengler critique from Timo Kölling, and I must admit that I am not aware of it, but I will take a look at it. So at least if AW, you can if you tell me that it's a critique worth reading, then I will definitely have a look at it. So thanks for that note.
I mean, so another distinction also that we could draw is, for example, if we're speaking of the Olympics, is with the Promethean. Now, the difference here would be, I think, that Prometheus, who, funnily enough, by origin Jesus is described as Promethean for some reason, a suffering god. But Prometheus does not precisely try to strive for the infinite or infinite space, but for a certain control and foresight over natural forces. So let's say this. We've been here 40 minutes. If there are any more questions, let us know now, and we'll get to them in a second. Let me also just point out that enrollment for the course is open. I'll describe everything now. Seminars begin October 7th at 6 p.m. UK time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're meeting 10 times in total. We're good with numbers today. So we're meeting 10 times. There are 7 recorded video lectures that Sebastian is writing for us. Sebastian leads the seminars as well. And we will be discussing, for example, the Faustian Soul, as we did today, the problem of world history, the meaning of numbers. So whether mathematics is at all universal, which Spengler denies. We will be discussing the city, the soul of the city, but also the form world of economic life. So our time, the machine, technics. What is the technological world? How can we understand technics in terms of its Faustian origin? So anyone who's interested in technology, in the machine, in money, in politics, in the political system that is democracy, and also in what Spengler has to say about Caesar and Caesarism. That's what we will be discussing towards the end of the course. Enrollment is now open. We're meeting for seminars 10 times. If you don't have time for the seminars, that's the best option for you. It also helps us keep the lights on. And if you want private sessions with Sebastian, then this third tier is the best for you. So if you have questions specifically on the course, on the technicalities, etc., just let us know as well, and I'll respond on that. And we've got a couple more questions now. The link to enroll is in the description of this video. It's also in the live chat. So help us here. If you enroll, that allows us to continue the work here on this channel. I've been building the Halcyon Academy now for 4 years, and that is how I get my bread and wine. So here's a question from So Appalled. Came to the live, okay, so, but how does Spengler's notion of civilization differ from the common notion of civilization? Very important question. Great question.
Very important, yes. So typically, I would say that civilization and culture are just used as synonyms. So in contrast to like uncivilized or uncultured, like barbaric, you know? But this is not the way Spengler uses it. For him, civilization is a phase within a culture's life cycle.
Yeah.
So cultures have different life cycles, and civilization is the name for the last and final phase of a culture's life. And civilization then means, if you will, the petrification, if that is a word, I hope so. So the becoming rigid of a culture, the phase where no new spiritual, religious or cultural inventions are taking place, but rather quantification and universalization are dominant, where like local differences are destroyed or annihilated. A period where money becomes very important, where democracy is the preferred style of politics. So we are living in a civilization right now, which means that we're living in the phase of a fulfillment of a culture, according to Spengler, but also it's in its last and final phase. He speaks of a letzte Weltstimmung, which means a last, a final world atmosphere, if you will.
Yeah.
And for Spengler, this final world atmosphere has been in existence since I think he says around 1900 for us. And this is the other question that was asked: when do you think the Twilight will be? So, according
let's read the whole question. When do you think the Twilight will be? When the oh so abound atmosphere we feel today is finally split asunder, and the necessary and quite intense trajectory of the century will herald forth. Well,
pious.
You must know, both of you. But anyways, go on.
No, very interesting question. Spengler would say we are already in this phase, and we have been for quite a while, and it can, like a cultural can, if you will, like exists in some type of zombie state for a long time, according to Spengler as well. So it might be that we see different culture arise or to begin to flourish while our civilization is still existing, going on, but not really, producing anything. So I think Spengler would say that anything new that will arise will have to come through a different type of spirit, or we have to prepare ourselves for a different kind of spirit, maybe. And as far as I myself am concerned, well, I'm not a true Spenglerian myself, so I can't really answer this question. I don't. I'm not sure when the time will be, but I think Spengler's analysis of a civilization is very poignant, and it makes a lot of sense for our own time. So that one is for sure, I think.
Okay, these were great questions, and we are now going into the night, but not gently, as good Faustians. The link to enroll is here in the description of this video, but also again in the live chat. If you want to enroll, you should do so now. We begin in a couple of weeks on a Saturday. We're meeting from 6 to 8 p.m. UK time. That's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you're in the US, 7 to 9 p.m. Central European Time. And you can look at the curriculum here and also the seminar dates. First one, October 7th, final one, December 16th. And there are a couple places left in the seminars. There is also the option to just get the video lectures and the PDFs of the lecture notes. Or if you want to have private tutorials with Sebastian and to discuss Spengler even further, or to get ideas for your project, maybe you're writing on something that is to do with the philosophy of history, or issues pertaining to the state of civilization, then that might be good for you as well. So the link to enroll is in the description. Help us, help ourselves.
Come join the course. This is a course you will not get at universities in Europe, at least as far as I'm aware of, simply because Spengler is not really taught at universities. And I think with this 10-week seminar, really, we're trying to get you really deep into Spengler, because you see a lot of talk about Spengler lately, and you see a lot of like online talk about Spengler, but a lot of it is, well, let's put it mildly, it stays on the surface of it, and just as we started out in the beginning, it's really relevant if you know what kind of Faust Spengler is referring to. Goethe's Faust or Marlowe's Faust, and to understand these differences, I think it's really worth joining the course and having a deep dive into this thinker. And
you should only learn German philosophy from Germans. That's sorry, but that's just the truth. So Sebastian will give you also important clues to what the original German text says as compared to the English translation.
Yes.
And it's simply, look, someone who is maybe from England or America might rather turn to Marlowe's Faust than and to cultural references from their realm, which is fair enough. But again, it is Goethe's Faust, and especially Faust II, that is in the background of what Spengler means by the Faustian soul. And also Goethe's entire, the methodology of metamorphosis of plants, etc. That's crucial. So this question here we won't answer, but we will actually answer at the course. Does Spengler provide any indications of what ingredients will be necessary to bring forth a new or merely just a different spirit? That, my friends, we will reserve for the discussion at the course. It's an excellent question, don't get me wrong.
This is a decisive question.
This is decisive, but this is an esoteric matter. So
Exactly.
not everything is for the public ear and eye. So pious promulgator, thank you for the question. Thank you for the prompt. Very good indeed. So we hope that you can come to the course and so that we can find out what these ingredients are. Yeah, well, that's it from us. We are now disappearing. Good night.
Take care.